And we have in every radio hour 22 minutes of ad time. Some instances they would say like, you get to keep all 22 minutes if you carry, our product at first, or you get half of it for your local sales.
So they found there a whole bunch of station owners who said, yes, we want to run Treason Radio.
Exactly. And it, they weren't all great affiliates. They weren't the biggest sticks, as they say, powerful, but we got across the country in a lot of places. And I think this guy also promised a lot of people some money that never materialized. And when he was questioned with stuff, he'd say, I had a brain tumor. Mm-hmm. And that really can carry you for about 3 or 4 or 5 months solid when you respond that way. But at one point, obviously, it falls apart. And so we lost sort of the Chicago affiliate that very early on because somebody was like, hey, this doesn't smell right. We had some people leave because things didn't smell right. And, but a lot of us were in it because it was important. There was no dissent. There was no mechanism for dissent in a mass media way. The internet there was no YouTube. Mm-hmm. We would stream, and at their peak, Al Franken, I think, at his peak in any given 5 minutes would get somewhere around 30,000 contemporaneous listeners, which now sounds, still relatively impressive, actually, on a daily basis. But it was done with reel on virtual dial-up networks. Now, I don't know if you know what reel is, but it was basically a virus that was put on your computer.
Reel. Oh, yeah.
And you could barely hear anything. And so to have 30,000 people at any given time listening to this was a real feat. There was no way that we understood how to monetize that, at least the management. And the biggest story, I think, can exemplify why it was such a different animal and how they didn't understand where the money was. Very early on in New York, the Rockettes, maybe this might have been 2005, or maybe late 2004. The Rockettes went on strike, and their union, after a couple of weeks, I think it was, put an ad on our New York affiliate. And within 24 hours, the owners, I think of whatever it is, 30 Rock or whatever, that the management basically gave major concessions to them to come back to the table under the only condition that they take the ad off the air.
They were that terrified of Liz Winstead.
Well, I'm on some level, but it was that we were talking to activists. People were sending us money in envelopes, and no one, and what a salesperson who was of the movement would have understood, or what a decent salesperson who had not been working in radio, which is about like your D+ level student, with all due respect, would have understood is like, wait a second, we should be selling to unions. Mm-hmm. We should be selling to activists. We should be getting a testimonial from that union, going to every union in the country. And they just didn't get that. And, we had offers from, tech shops like that ended up working for Obama's campaign and whatnot to go and help us target listeners. But the radio people, they're like, no, we got to do a contest and send out flyers. I mean, it was
what?
Yes. I mean, you have to understand, like, they just didn't know what they had. And it took 5 years and multiple managements to ultimately kill it. And it ended up dying with a lineup that included Lionel, who was just most recently in the news for being a 4chan QAnon guy.
Wait, who?
Lionel.
Hutz?
Just, there's no last name. He was just this dude who was doing independent radio. The last iteration of Air America was a complete grift. Like, I literally had one executive who I would see him and he would do this from The Sting to me, like the old, finger on the nose indicating that everybody's on the take. And it was an incredible learning experience to see the whole thing fall apart.
Wait, so who else was in the last lineup? There's Lionel and
Montel Williams.
Neat.
And then I don't know who else. Everyone else had been jettisoned. Marin and I had done a show in that last iteration that was literally resigned to the break room where the vending machines were. And it was just online, and folks can actually check out some of that on YouTube still. But
Was a vending machine in the shot?
At first, we did it because we wanted to harass the people coming into the room, and then no one would come in when we were there. So, but it was a series of management failures, and then they didn't realize. Like then, podcasts started happening, YouTube started happening. We were using Justin TV for live video, which ultimately became Twitch. And I can tell you this: when we launched, if you went to AirAmericaRadio.com, the only thing on that site was a picture of a microphone that was not. It didn't. You could put your mouse on it, but there was nothing to click.
You can't click the microphone.
There was nothing.
Okay.
And so I had set up a movable type blog. I had my sister do it, and we were getting 30,000, 40,000 uniques an hour during the show because it was the only place people could go. And our show was very much, I thought like there's going to be a huge fight to see who's going to get Atrios on the show or, Talking Points Memo or, Marcus Malitzis. And none of the people there were even aware of what was going on online, which was the only place there was any dissent for, and where the left was, congregating. And by the time that we finished in 2010, the last round of management had said to me, because I kept getting fired from them, and then they were afraid to actually go through with it because there would be these petitions that would be circulated.
You should have told them you had a brain tumor.
I should have said the brain tumor thing. I should have gone on with that, but
this is good advice for the listeners too.
Yes.
They've already gotten something they can
medical
use.
calamities can buy you like 3 to 6 months. And imagine if you're just working and not the person who's supposedly funding the whole thing. It could buy you maybe 6 to 8 years.
There's not a guarantee. This is not medical advice. But it is legal advice. We are lawyers, and this is formally legal advice.
They had so little understanding of the internet that the last guy, even in 2009, had said to me, this guy, Bennett Zier, who had come from, again, a Clear Channel guy. He was the CEO. I checked his donations. Mitt Romney in 2008. Like, people make this mistake that the failure of Air America was a function of they didn't go in there for business. They only went in there for politics. The fact is, not a single owner of that company understood either. They weren't there for the politics. They weren't there for the business. They were there for some third reason, all of them, that ranged from wanting to be part of like we had a Silicon Valley, the guy from Real Networks, millionaire, wanted to be part of like the Hollywood elite and wanted to hang out at like Ariana Huffington parties. Mark Green's brother, who is a major real estate guy in New York, wanted, I think, a job in the Clinton administration that he thought was going to happen, chairing HUD. We had another guy who was largely a trust fund baby, elderly, who I think wanted to prove that he could run a business. There was always a third reason that really had nothing to do with either. And so
I hope everyone got their dreams.
Everyone lost.
Damn.
Except for Rachel Maddow.
Yeah, good for her.
And ultimately Marin, I think, did pretty well.
Doing well.
And I,
you're doing very well. How's Al Franken doing?
Franken, I don't think he's doing what he wants to do right now.
He kind of fell off the map after Air America fell apart.
For a brief period of time, he was in the spotlight. Yeah. And less so now, but, and there was this myth around where you'll see people talk about there's no room for left-wing radio. If we were doing, my guess would be that someone smart will come in at one point with the radio business dying and will create a network that is just playing podcasts and will change the industry. The industry is going to change.
Mm-hmm. Why are you so confident about that?
Because it's obvious. It's just a question of look, there's no doubt in my mind that if there were 3 mid-size AM talk radio stations in Michigan and 3 in Wisconsin, that were playing any number of left-wing shows, that those states would have gone for Hillary Clinton. I mean, you're only talking about, combined, less than 30,000 people. And talk radio motivates people and gets people out. And so I think at one point, somebody will see the efficacy of it. But the part of it is that it tends to be a medium that's much more populist. Mm-hmm. The populist agenda on the left does not align as well with money in the way that it has been on the right. And so there was we never got money from, let's say, the Democracy Alliance. We never got Soros money. Mm. And I think part of it is just not perceived as sexy. I think there's, I have a whole theory about the way that the left funds things, but at one point it's just going to become a very effective means in which to monetize podcasts.
Well, I guess what I'm driving at is, hasn't the radio industry changed a bit in the past decade? Isn't the story just monopolization?
Well, that monopolization existed prior to the past decade.
Doesn't it accelerate?
Clear Channel, I think to a certain extent, but not. I think Clear Channel had bought up everything.
Yeah,
and so we would get on like the third Clear Channel station, fourth channel in any type of market, and so you would have a much worse signal, frankly, and so you couldn't compete in the same way. That has happened, and so you get everything is automated, but in the meantime, the Heritage Foundation, all these slush funds still pay a lot of these hosts. Locally, they get, you can write on Town Hall for an obscene amount of money, relative to other websites.
I guess what I'm asking is does that opportunity still exist? Are there enough stations that you could organize, that you could make deals with to run some kind of nationally syndicated left radio?
Well, it depends on how big of a network. I mean, you could make a network out of 10 stations, right? I mean, now it's also much cheaper that you could do it through IP instead of doing it through a satellite. The technology has progressed so rapidly. And in some ways, you would use radio now as a means in which to, like I say, advertise a podcast almost. Mm-hmm. And it would be just another distribution mechanism. Some of your advertising would be sort of direct response stuff. Some of it would be like, we're only going to play one episode of Chapo on Tuesday. But if you want Thursday's episode, go to Patreon or whatever it is. Certainly, like from Chapo's perspective, sure, you can have our programming as long as we don't have to edit it in some fashion.